Okay, I saw a thing change. It says live now.
Yes,
we are live.
Yeah.
Oh God. So where's
everyone.
the channel thing? I want to share the link for people on Twitter.
Well, we did share it on Twitter.
Yeah, I shared it on Twitter, so you can retweet
so you can just
it
retweet
or
it if you'd
copy
like,
it.
or yeah.
Spectacular. Okay.
Yes, so everyone's listening to our lovely conversation as we went live. But anyway, welcome everyone to our, I guess, weekend live stream. We don't usually have these, but we're very happy to have the Renegade of Funk with us. It's the first time that we're kind of talking like this, so it's very exciting. We always get to meet people, and this is awesome. So
yes.
As we know, you are I don't know how you would say it, but I guess you're a lovely citizen of Japan. Is this correct?
Citizen. No, I'm a resident. I am an American. I'm not even a permanent resident. I'm a transient homeless person. Yeah. I'm a
visa holder.
Something like that. I'm a digital nomad, basically. I do tech consulting. I work for startups, all kinds of nerdy programming shit if you want to get into it. But I've been kind of slumming it in Tokyo the last few years. So, yeah.
What brought you to Japan?
Well, I actually visited Japan like 10 years ago, and I dug it. That was back when I was teaching, actually. And then I went back to New York, switched to an engineering career because it's way more lucrative than teaching and dealing with snot-nosed kids all day. So I made my career there. I got into the consulting game where you can charge $200 an hour, and been enjoying myself, really just traveling throughout East Asia. Now I have a startup of my own that I work on. I could mention that later. It's kind of its own weird, crazy story. And getting into random debates online. I have people that I've been on a few different channels, and I have a little notoriety as the Black Mensa guy because I am a member of Mensa. So according to tests, my IQs are around 150, 160. So you probably shouldn't disagree with me. You'll just be wrong.
Alrighty then. Guess we won't.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this guy, JF. I've been on his channel once, and also this white nationalist chick, Tara McCarthy, because apparently the idea of a high IQ black person is very strange. Oh, by the way, I'm black. I should mention that. My family's from Jamaica. So, there you go.
Is it weird that, because you just mentioned that it's weird, I guess, for some, a black person to have 150 IQ. Is that weird when you hear that?
160.
So according to standardized tests, around 160, but once you get that many standard deviations up, it's very hard to be precise. In any event, I do have membership. I've had to prove that to people I've talked to online. It's not weird. I mean, you feel a kind of a cultural disconnect, and I've studied the issue a lot. There's a controversy about racial link between, IQ and race, of course. It's something I've looked into a lot and written about on my blog, but I'm comfortable in my own skin. I like it here in Tokyo, and I've been in a lot of different communities around the world, and I'm someone who can get along anywhere, so it's not really a problem.
Wait, I was gonna say something, now I forgot.
Not to.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So my brother lives in Tokyo, actually. I think he lives in, I can't remember if he lives in Shibuya or Roppongi. I'm not sure.
Roppongi, yeah, that's where all the foreigners are. If he's in Roppongi, then he's probably doing shady stuff. Just warning you.
Oh, great! No,
yeah,
he's in the master's program in Tokyo U. So he's like they're doing architecture stuff.
Master in something. Roppongi is really shady. A lot of clubs and a lot of prostitutes. So make sure he's getting tested.
Yeah, basically what Nico's saying is that her brother's a smart one in the family.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. All right. Good to know. At least someone got some of the genes. Right. Can you guys give me a little bit of background on you? Because all I know is from Twitter and a couple of videos. Like, what's your thing?
You can go ahead, Shane.
What's my thing?
What's your thing?
Channel started and everything.
Oh, how our channel started?
Yeah.
Okay, so as most people know who subscribe to us, or if you don't, there's this lovely subreddit on Reddit called Our Happas, and they hate us for whatever reason. I guess because we have white dads, whatever. So automatically we're products of white supremacy. I know it's stupid.
Right. Yes.
So yeah, and I believe Nico said something along the lines of, we're not white supremacists, we're Happa supremacists. And then when it came to naming our channel, Happa supremacy just was the one we kept going to. So that's how we did that. And
I understand.
Yeah, and then for, I guess, just, I don't know, like our politics or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not liberal.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not progressive.
Sure.
I'm more a libertarian, but I'm not 100% libertarian.
Word.
So
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am too.
Yeah, like my dad's conservative, like straight up conservative. So I still have some of those political beliefs in me.
Yeah.
But I've strayed away from that. Not entirely, but I'm not 100% conservative like I used to, or anything like that.
So you've gone from more conservative to more libertarian.
Yeah, it's funny too because I used to be kind of more on the left too. So it's kind of been more, I guess, evolving or whatever you want to call it.
Can I ask what motivated that shift?
Part of the problem with Dave Smith, you can blame him for that. He's the main reason why I became a libertarian, or
Yeah, same
more
for me,
more
actually.
so.
Right.
His I mean, I know some even libertarians, for example, have problems with him. It's ridiculous, the retarded infighting within the libertarian movement. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but
I know a bit about it. You know, I've seen the conventions with the fat people dancing in their underwear. I've seen the concerned.
That's like the go-to. Haha, libertarians are retarded. Look at this guy in his underwear. Haha.
Yeah. Well, you know, the problem is that you guys shoot yourselves in the foot a lot. You know, you're constantly, the infighting is all about ideological purity, you know, purity testing. And
Yeah,
when you're a small movement, you can't do too much of that. You have to start getting some traction, and then you worry about that.
Yeah, and that's the main problem. As you were saying, we shoot ourselves a lot in the foot, and that's exactly what's going on. You know, because when with Gary Johnson, a lot of libertarians don't like him, but he did pretty well for being a third party candidate as president, considering who was running.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm sympathetic. When I was in college, I went through my edgy objectivist phase. I read Rand stuff, and I understand the appeal, the idea of rational self-interest and leave everyone alone and it'll all just sort itself out. Right. And that's something that I kind of wish were true. I think there's a sort of similarity between libertarianism and communism in that they are premised on false ideas about human nature. And the thing that really evolved my own political understanding is reading a lot about evolution and biology and anthropology and just human nature. And also, ironically, becoming a software engineer, I've become a lot more fatalistic, and I realize that as organic beings, we're sort of just stuck with the hardware and software endowed with us by nature, and so we have to work within that framework. And that's really where the core of all of my criticisms of libertarianism would come from, that they just don't jive with our reality. But that's something that we can dig into if you like, or I don't know if I have to go any more into my own background. Wait, before we went live, did I introduce myself to the people in the audience, or are we good now?
If you'd like to introduce yourself more, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if there's any questions about me. I've done a few of these live streams, and I don't really like talking about myself very much. But yeah, I basically, as I mentioned, engineer living in Japan, and I do run a small startup now that's funded by the Japanese government for matchmaking. It's a curious thing. Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's sort of so I was actually studying to get a certificate for Japanese language fluency here in Tokyo, and I was watching all of these soap operas to improve my listening, and I got this idea for a matchmaking site based on marriage contracts, and I mentioned it to a guy who works for the Japanese startup funding office. They have an organization that provides public funding to startups that have socially beneficial missions, and they're really paranoid about the birth rate in this country. The birth rate's very low. So they gave me 3 million yen to build this site, and I did, and we have about 1,500 users now. So it's growing slowly, but it's basically like the movie Hitch, but Kevin James is the Japanese government, and I'm Will Smith. So that's how I describe it. Yeah.
So I looked at, I guess, your blog post about that website.
Yeah.
And I kind of get how it is different from a dating website, but is it actually like your goal is marriage, but I mean, like, is
correct
when you meet the person by that time, are you like signing a contract for that, or is that like?
Oh no. We don't have the ability to actually force people to get married. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, like, How do you, or when the person meets the other person who they matched up with, then at what stage are they at in that?
That's kind of up to them. So, the main thing the site does is it helps you to create a marriage contract, to create a formal agreement about your relationship. And then after you have that, and you can actually send messages to people, or you can send what's called a proposal, where you send them a copy of your contract, and they can accept or decline it. After that, all that happens is it exchanges your contact info, and that's it. You can then go hang out with the person. You could ignore them. You could meet up and say, "Oh, you smell bad. Leave me alone." You can do whatever you want. But it's just meant to be an alternative paradigm to dating, because I think dating is kind of retarded and doesn't really make sense, and is sort of out of step with our evolutionary history. That's why the cultures that have adopted a dating paradigm over the last century all have low birth rates, and the ones that do arranged marriage and more traditional courting all have far higher rates of fertility. So I'm trying to come up with alternatives, because it's this great question. In developed countries, particularly high IQ developed countries, how do you encourage greater fertility? It's not an easy problem to solve. IQ correlates very negatively with birth, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of the things that you talked about in your post were the problems with dating nowadays. Sometimes you don't get to the really important things. Like, am I just dating to have fun, or are you dating to marry? Like that type of stuff until later, and then you waste a lot of time dating.
Yeah, both parties have an incentive to not tell the truth. That's the problem. It incentivizes dishonesty, the whole concept of it. And it's particularly bad for women, of course, because they have limited fertility. And the thing that men value most in women is fertility and youth. And you burn that out on a bunch of chads who have no interest in committing to you. And then by the time you are ready to commit, your options are a lot limited. And this is my main critique of. This is one of my critiques of feminism as well. That it's a movement that encourages women to give as little of their utility, of their fertility and youth, to their future husbands as possible. So you end up with both bitter and disenchanted men and women. So it's a significant cultural problem that's not easily solved. But I think we need to think of alternatives to the modern dating paradigm.
Feminism, though, in general, is not really a thing in Japan now, is it?
It kind of is. There's elements of it. There was a bit of a hashtag #MeToo, and there are certainly elements that are pushing it in the society and parts of the media. People argue that it's one of the reasons why Japan has a lower birth rate, because there are a lot more women working. And even Abe, the current prime minister, very conservative, his whole economic program is about trying to make it easier for women to work, trying to encourage more working women. I think that's misguided. I think the reason why women are not getting married and having as many children, it's not because it's hard for them to have careers. It's the exact opposite. It's because it's so easy for them to have careers. It's so easy for them to compete with men. And historically, the reason why they wanted to get married was for economic security. And now with everyone working, that argument's out the window. So we need some paradigm that competes with that. I think another part of it is we have to think about the future, right? We have to worry about what's going to happen to the economy when AI begins to phase out a lot of jobs. And I think that's only going to put more pressure on men and women in terms of pair bonding. And I think one job that is very difficult to phase out is the job of a mother, stay-at-home mother. At least I don't think we should have robots do that job. So for sort of future-proofing the economy, I think it makes sense to try to incentivize more single-income earner families in terms of policy. That would be my recommendation. But right now what they're trying to do is just buy more children. They have a lot of subsidies and grants you can get if you have kids. That helps a little bit in the short term. France has tried that, but it doesn't solve the underlying cultural and social issues that have led to the birth rate. See, in Japan, people think that it's all about economics, that the reason why people aren't getting married and having kids is because the economy is slow. That's not really accurate, because the birth rate really started its sharpest decline in the early 70s when the economy was still booming like crazy. So you have to try to figure out those underlying cultural problems about why people are forming families less. It's more complicated than just money. Sorry, I can ramble a lot, as you can tell. But, hey, talking about IQ, speaking fast, people who speak fast, that also correlates positively with IQ. So if you see someone who speaks very quickly, that's a good sign.
Oh, okay. That's good, Mark.
Well, I speak pretty fast, but I also tend to mumble a lot. So
yeah, I do too. I know what you mean.
That was an interesting point that you made earlier, though, that a lot of jobs will be phased out by things that can be automated. But
Yes.
Of course, like stay-at-home moms shouldn't fall into that category, obviously. So it does make sense to go back to more of that type of system.
I think so too, and I think in general we should be trying to aim for more of a leisure-based society. If you've ever read like 19th century sci-fi, and they all have their predictions about the year 2000, they always imagine a world where people work like 10 hours a week, 2 days a week, like the Jetsons in the 50s. George Jetson famously worked like 2-hour days. And the rest of the time, people were just at leisure, just doing whatever they wanted. And I think that's like my exact dream for the future. It's not a world where only men work. It's a world where very few people work. And now the way our economy is structured, we think of a future where robots do all the work, and it's a bad thing. We're terrified of it. We're terrified that we're not going to get to do all this work that potentially can be automated. It just speaks to our priorities and our sort of materialistic value system. It's something that we should all re-examine.
I think people are scared that they won't be able to provide any type of value, and that would mean that they don't get paid, like that kind of thing.
Yes, correct. And this is, kind of the Randian libertarian crux, the moral crux, the idea that your value comes from what you're able to produce economically. And I disagree with that. I don't agree with that fundamentally materialistic values. It's one of the reasons why feminists have become so powerful in the culture, because people agree with their premise that you're only valuable if you produce economic wealth of some kind. And so it adds to the logic of, yes, we need 50% of CEOs to be women. Yes, we need more subsidies and affirmative action. The value system is demanding that. Whereas from my point of view, I think that a lot of the greatest value humans provide is at home with their children, with their families, with their communities, when they're not earning a paycheck. That's some of the most important uncelebrated work that is done by human beings. And those communities where it's not being done well are the communities that are suffering the most. And I see this particularly in the Black community, where I worked in the inner cities for a long time. And you have, all kinds of fatherlessness, broken families. And yet they celebrate that Black women are among the most college educated. They have the most student loan debt. They're working, more than Black men are. And yet there's all of this breakdown, all of this crime and STDs and all of these, endemic social problems. And yet, the root of it is this materialistic value system that has devalued the family. That's my view of it.
Yeah, and I think not having, I guess, like the man work, and he's married to a woman, and the woman stays at home, causes a lot of extra problems that people don't think about. Like,
sure,
as one of them is like nutrition. People don't think of that, but time to like do anything related to nutrition if you're working all the time and you're a single mom. And so then it causes people to have health problems, and then, it just spirals from there. And I think that a lot of people don't see that connection.
Yeah, there's a huge connection there. It's funny, in the developed world, the poor people are fat, their nutrition is terrible. Some libertarians see this as a great sign of capitalism success. Our poor people are fat. No, this isn't a good thing. They're unhealthy. They're suffering. They're not living as long as they should. I think it's true that a lot falls from the breakdown of the family and the sexual revolution of the 60s in general. I think a lot of what's wrong with society comes from that. But there's no easy answers. And my startup, my business, my work is just one part of it.
There are libertarians who are saying that fat people is a good sign of capitalism.
Correct. Yes, because of capitalism, the poor people are fat. I've heard this argument a few times.
Huh.
Never heard that one before, but that's interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it, but okay.
Yeah, it's a sign of the success that food is so cheap and abundant in the more capitalist societies. That's not even a direct correlation. You have capitalist societies like Singapore where poor people aren't as fat. It's a cultural problem, really, but it's still an issue.
It can also be what kind of food they're eating, and
it's like not even
the
real
shit
food
that they put into the food is really bad.
Yeah, it's awful. It's one of the things. It's another one of many reasons why I've decided to stay in Tokyo. It's much easier to eat nutritiously in Japan than in the States. I was in Florida for a few weeks a while ago, and I gained like 2 pounds just from eating American food. I come back to Japan, and the portion sizes are smaller. It's a lot healthier. I'm very much prefer staying here for health reasons.
Yeah, I totally understand. When I lived in Asia for like 3-4 months back in 2011, and I used to eat, I would like eat a lot actually, but I still lost like 10 pounds. And then as soon as I moved back here, instantly gained back the weight. Like, I don't know what in the food or something, but like.
Where is here? Where are you guys based?
Oh, we're from Dallas. We're in Dallas.
Dallas. Oh, cool. Yeah, I've been through Texas before. I have an aunt in Austin. Heard good things about it. Yeah. Well, Dallas is kind of liberal, isn't it? I've heard it's kind of got a progressive community.
Well, the inner city is, but like we're in North Dallas, and pretty much everywhere around like everywhere outside the inner city is more of like a red territory. But,
I see.
Yeah, but then like the inner city, and I'm telling you, it's like really rich, really rich liberal type people, like progressives who think they're, I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much any city, Houston, Austin especially.
Austin is like a cesspool.
Yeah.
Right. It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Apologies for my chair. Apparently, it's making a farting noise. I need to put some oil in it. That's not me. It's not Nicolette. She's not gaseous. That's just the chair.
You shaved her an hour ago.
Hey.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I know, right?
Women don't fart, guys. Don't you know that?
Yeah. No, I've heard that. I've heard that. All right, groovy. Yeah. So you guys, I guess you didn't really grow up in Asia. You seem pretty Americanized.
Oh yeah, we're pretty Americanized. Even though he was born in Korea, but no, we both grew up in the States. So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you don't like speak Korean or Chinese or anything?
I used to speak a little bit Tagalog, but I kind of lost all of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But Sheen doesn't speak Korean, so.
No, speaking the Korean.
Oh.
Yeah, I know Annyeonghaseyo. That's about it. There's a lot of Koreans here. A lot of Koreans here in Tokyo, actually. And a lot in media as well. You see them on TV. It's kind of a trend. I do speak Japanese because I've studied it. Not native level, but enough to work in an office. So if you want to learn some Japanese curse words, I can teach you.
I used to study Japanese in high school, but I kind of have forgotten it since I don't use it anymore. So it kind of sucks because I was like elementary level before. So
yeah. It's a fascinating language. You can say a lot just by conjugating verbs the right way. You can conjugate a verb to have like the equivalent meaning of 10 English words, which I think is always cool. And also, just to politicize it a little bit, it's a very gendered language. It's a very heavily gendered language. There's words that men don't use and words that women don't use. Like there's just different words for I and you that are based on gender. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, how dare you!
Yeah.
I'm just dreading the day that people start, I don't know, like if it gets that bad where they start saying like, oh, we need to change the language to be more, inclusive.
You've read Orwell, right? You've read Orwell. That's the final goal.
Yeah. I just hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, I hope so too. There is some, discussion of that in Japan a little bit. There's been, for the Olympics, they're trying to have more English and trying to be a little bit more inclusive. But for the most part, Japan culturally is still fairly conservative. And it's one of the reasons why I'm sort of optimistic long term. I think, even though the birth rate is low now, I think things can turn around, or they'll adapt by just having robots replace all their workers.
Yeah, one of the reasons why my brother won't, he's like set on not moving back here. He's like, I just love the culture in Japan compared to in the US. He's like, I don't have to deal with any of the shit that you guys deal with.
Yeah, I understand. I understand the sentiment. I'm pretty content here as well, but it's not perfect, of course. There are things you have to get used to, and there are certain truths that you have to accept. As a foreigner, you're always going to be a foreigner. You're always going to be seen as an outsider. The nature of it is that if you're not of Japanese blood, even if you become a citizen, which is really hard, they're always going to see you as an outsider. And this is true of like if you're a white person who's born in China and you grow up there and you only speak Chinese, they're still going to see you as not Chinese because their understanding of what it is to be Chinese is defined by ethnicity, by blood, basically. And this is anathema to a lot of Westerners who have a completely different conception of culture. I mentioned this because I have a friend, another YouTuber by the name of Black Pigeon Speaks.
Yes.
Who, he lives out here. I go drinking with him sometimes. Real degenerate, that guy. But anyway, he he had a bit of a row with this other YouTuber, this girl called Kanada-jin-san.
Oh, I know her. Didn't she become Muslim?
You know her? Oh, great. Yeah.
I thought it was so weird because I followed her for a while, and then she.
Yeah. She's one of my favorite people. I love her to death because she's really fascinating. She basically lived in Japan for a few years and then started using the term "we" when referring to Japanese people because she's so identified with them. And I think I got blocked from her on YouTube because I made a comment saying that you're being culturally chauvinistic. You're imposing a Western notion of culture on them by saying that we, because only Westerners have this idea that you can go to a country, hang out for a few years, and be on the same level of standing as the natives. Japanese people and Asians in general do not think that. That's a novel concept. And you're imposing that on them. And now she's Muslim, which makes it even more hilarious. So I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah, she I remember I was watching some of her videos about she had applied for citizenship, and then that's how I kind of know what you're talking about when you say that it's extremely hard to become a citizen, because it seemed like, based on what she was talking about, the process seems kind of insane.
Yeah, it's very long. I think there are only like a few thousand citizens that get naturalized every year compared to the States where it's like hundreds of thousands, millions. Even if you compare the populations, the rate is much higher.
But apparently we're not doing enough.
Yeah.
Just
let them come in, just flock in, whatever you want.
Well, hey, it's your own damn fault. It's your materialistic value system. You think people are interchangeable, right? The Asians at least know that there's a fundamental difference between in-group and out-group. But you think you can convert everyone to Americanism. This is a conservative ideology.
Yeah, it's also if you don't bring in the immigrants, you're going to be, name called and all the bullshit. It's so stupid.
Yeah. I was just going to say, a lot of people think that libertarians are all open borders, but I think we've come to the conclusion that it's pragmatically not, it's not logical to have everyone come in if we're all going to support random people who are not going to share the same culture.
It's kind of like when you fill a balloon up with water. Eventually, that balloon's going to burst. If you have too many people here, it's going to be ridiculous.
Well, you've identified a conundrum of libertarianism that's not easily resolved.
Right.
I would argue that closed borders libertarianism is a contradiction in terms, because the whole basic ideology is freedom of association. If you're going to create some border and say arbitrarily you're not allowed to associate with foreigners unless the government says they're cool, then that is a contradiction of the non-aggression principle, is it not? Many would plausibly argue that in order to be libertarian, you have to be open borders to some extent. And then, of course, if you are open borders, as you were alluded to, you suffer from the problem of the ideology basically cannibalizing itself, right? You have this prosperous country in the United States, mostly white European, and then you bring in tens of millions of minorities of non-whites from South America or Africa or the Middle East, wherever, who don't share your ideology. They vote in politicians that strip away all of your liberties. And basically, it's like, I believe Stefan Molyneux talked about this. This is basic game theory. If you have a group of people where one group of people are acting as individuals and another group of people are acting as a group, the people acting as a group have a huge advantage. And this is what's happening in the United States, particularly to white people. Other ethnicities act as a group. They vote in a block, right? Blacks identify very strongly with it as a racial tribe. So do Asians and Indians and Hispanics. They vote as a tribe. With Trump, that sort of changed. White people kind of voted as a block. It's part of why he won. But in any event, the basic ideology of libertarianism only works if every single person in the world agrees with it, right? If only one small group of people agree and everybody else decides to act collectively, then it stands no chance of surviving.
It's kind of like people saying that democracy is also, the majority forcing its will on the minority. You think that's a good way of looking at it, or?
Well, I mean, are you asking? Do I think if democracy is a good idea, a good system?
Yeah,
that's an interesting question. I sort of agree with what I think it was Churchill said, which is that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other ones. Actually, you know what? No, that's maybe being too bullish on democracy. I actually think democracy is kind of shitty. Like, it's easy to settle on because majoritarianism sort of appeals to our tribal nature. It's been around for a long time. But the democracies we have lend themselves to a lot of corruption because you don't have direct democracy. You have all these layers of bureaucracy and representation in between the people and their laws. And so you have all this rent seeking, you have all of this, waste, and this is a big problem with Western democracies. There's so much corruption. There's this deep state, can only come about in a democratic society where the people are insulated from the actions of their government. And this is a moral hazard. This is a big moral hazard. You have the United States supporting terrorists in the Middle East, bombing people in Yemen, and drone striking civilians, and yet people have no connection to that. They're just like, oh, I have no idea what my government does. And that's not a good thing when those people get mad, come to your country and blow themselves up in a shopping mall. Yeah. And you say, hey, whoa, what's that about? Well, your government's doing shitty stuff that you don't know about.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even want to acknowledge or think about that.
No, they don't.
I think the only time in U.S. politics where they openly talked about that was when Ron Paul talked about blowback.
Yeah, and look how far he got.
Yeah, I know.
He did pretty well for, I guess, a lot of people became libertarian because of that type of.
Or at least became more anti-war or whatever. Because I mean, there are anti-war left that are consistent with their anti-war. It doesn't matter who the president is. Lee Camp is one of them. Caitlin Johnstone's another one. Jimmy Dory's another. There's a lot of leftists out there who are consistent with their anti-war views.
Yeah, I've heard that, and this is Bill Maher has talked about the left libertarianism thing. They tend to be just kind of dude weed libertarians, care about their drugs and the anti-war ones. I can sympathize with that, but it's not really genuine libertarianism because they buy into all the social justice nonsense, all of that cruft and baggage, which again contradicts the basic idea of libertarianism.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really subscribe to that, but I'm not bullish on democracy as an ideology. I think if we're in theoretical land, probably the best form of government are small city-states with a very loose federation, something similar to the Articles of Confederation, actually. Sorry?
I said I could agree with that. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, I'm someone who, again, my beliefs are sort of informed by my understanding of biology and human nature, and I think we are a tribal species. It's built into our hardware. The example I like to give is the one from, I think this was mentioned in Nicholas Wade's book, Troublesome Inheritance. If you just look at people's eyes, human eyes have this white part, I think it's called the sclera, which allows you to infer where someone is looking and what they're thinking through just by eye contact. And other primates don't have this. If you think about like gorillas, they have just dark eyes. Mm-hmm. That is a tribal feature that was selected for us, that allowed us to survive more. And there are a lot of other tribal features that give us very unpolitically correct, politically incorrect instincts around race, around gender. There are massive, massive differences between the sexes, between ethnic groups, and we have to work with that hardware and try to have our political systems be derived by an understanding of that. To the extent that we don't do that, we have unsustainable, destructive systems.
That's an interesting way of looking at it for sure.
Thanks. Sorry, that's probably a mouthful. I talk a lot. You can change subjects if you want.
Oh no, that's good. I like when we like
it's
when
kind of like mind blowing.
Yeah, I like when when they talk. It's good.
No, I do that sometimes. It's fun. I like debating people. I debate people in Mensa a lot too. There's a lot of old white guys in there, and they're very pedantic and annoying. But we debate politics. Mensa people, by the way, the older guys at least are super red-pilled, if that's still the cool thing to say. They're very bullish on Trump, and they're very much about kind of not libertarianism, but they're very anti-SJW, which is kind of cool. Because that's something that drives me nuts too. I went through that phase as well, and I think it's just completely lost the plot. The whole modern left is completely insane.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially with all the recent events with Kavanaugh, I'm just like still laughing about people actually thinking that that a white power sign was made.
The okay sign. That was poll. That was /poll. That was 4chan.
Yeah, I know. It's just so sad. They fell for it completely, and now they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, especially that lady who did the first time. Oh my gosh, she did, and then the second time was like, it was so obvious.
Yeah,
like,
and then people took it seriously.
Yeah, are you this dumb?
Yeah,
she was fucking yawning, and then she did it. Nobody yawns like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty good troll. I have to give them credit for that, and it's created all of this paranoia. You know, the OK sign and is milk racist and all this stuff. It's pretty funny.
That was a thing for about 2 seconds. If you drink milk.
Yeah. Well, Band-Aids are racist. That's true. Band-Aids are definitely racist.
What?
They are. I'm black. The skin, the color is wrong. I mean, that's something that's bugging me.
Okay. I never even thought that.
Band-Aids are mad racist, yo.
What about the Band-Aids that have like cartoon characters or Hello Kitty on it, huh?
Crazy racist. Even worse. No, I'm probably kidding.
Somebody would think that's like they would take that seriously and make an argument for that and write an article about that.
I'm sure it's on HuffPost as we speak. I'm sure there's already a thing about it.
Someone in the chat is wanting to ask you what your view is on how Japanese see other cultures.
It varies. You know, there's a big difference between how they view other Asians and non-Asians. They tend to have a very negative view of other Asian cultures, particularly the Chinese. Every year you have complaints about Chinese tourists around the time of cherry blossom season, because Chinese tourists will do a lot of shady stuff. They'll like climb up on the sakura tree, the cherry blossom trees, and they'll rip off branches and keep them as souvenirs.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, I know. And they'll, buy out all of the toilet paper in convenience stores to resell them back in China. So if you live near an area that's got a lot of tourists, you can't buy toilet paper. They just don't abide by the same social norms as Japanese do. And Japan really demonstrates a very high trust society. Like Japan is a place where you can get passed out drunk on the street and you wake up the next day, you still have your wallet and shoes. That certainly isn't true in New York. In China, they have a much more kind of a mercenary ideology of like, I'll just do whatever I can get away with. And so, I would say their view of other Asian cultures, particularly China, Korea as well, they have kind of I don't know if I should say this, but the view of Koreans is very interesting because there's a lot of Koreans in media. There's a whole special immigration and registration law for Koreans since World War II. Mm-hmm. And so some people, so I'm a member of Japan Mensa as well. So I talk to high IQ Japanese people, and they seem to think of Koreans the same way a lot of conspiratorial people think of Jews. Like there's all these Koreans in the media. Yeah, they do. Like there's all these Koreans in the news media saying all this anti-Japanese stuff. It's just kind of funny. There's a lot of celebrities in Japan who you'll find out, you look into their history, they're like half Korean. And so that's kind of a weird thing. So it's like the Chinese are like the Mexicans and the Koreans are like the Jews, and everyone else, they just kind of make fun of them and don't care.
So are they in the mindset that the Koreans are in control of the media?
Not in control, but have infiltrated some parts of it.
Infiltrating.
Oh yeah.
You have to understand, Japan is still ethnically 99% Japanese. So it's an interesting thing to be in a society where like the taxi driver is Japanese, the garbage collector is Japanese, your lawyer is Japanese. Like everyone, like you go to New York, white people don't drive cabs or drive Uber. There are certain jobs that some ethnic groups just don't do. Like I've never been to a Dunkin' Donuts in the United States that's not run by Indian people. And there's this inherent sort of ethnic grouping, certain rungs of society, certain job categories are just owned by that ethnicity. I've never been to a nail salon that's not Vietnamese. Whereas in Japan, pretty much every type of job is done by Japanese people, which I think is a good thing. But there's still clustering. There's still clustering of certain ethnic groups in different parts of society and in certain neighborhoods. So there are fears, there's concerns about it.
I have heard that if you're a foreigner or if you're half a foreigner, like half Japanese, half something else or something like that, and it is harder to get jobs, like certain jobs. And like for my brother in particular, he had to pretend that he was half Japanese in order to get an apartment.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The nice thing about Japan is actually that the racism is a lot more open and a lot more polite. Like there'll be night spots.
That's a good quote.
Yes, it is. There are night spots in Japan where they'll put up signs that say Japanese only. They literally just don't want any foreigners. And when you go looking for an apartment, your real estate agent might say to you, "Oh, these buildings, they just don't accept foreigners." Like they're just very casual about it. And then if you try to go to those night spots, if you try to go in anyway, then the proprietor will come out and just bow to you and say, sorry, you can't come in. He'll be like really nice to you about it. And I kind of like that. I kind of like my racism open and polite. That's the best way to be racist. Like don't lie about it, don't hide it, and be nice about it. And yet all of that said, I've experienced way less racism in Tokyo than I have in New York. People have been super nice, super polite to me. especially when they see you speak their language. In general, Japanese people are awesome. So the half thing is kind of a trend, but it does speak to a general thing in Asia, that there is still very explicit ethnic tribalism. And this is the problem that sort of half people around the world face, is like, the question is, what's your allegiance? Who are you loyal to? You know, you've got two races going on. If there were a conflict, if there were a war or something, whose side are you on? You don't really know. And that would be the argument against, you know, Hapa supremacy, I guess. Right.
And that's why we're trying to start the Hapa ethno state, where all half Asian, half white people can come and we can make our own country.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. That's a good idea, because unfortunately, you probably wouldn't be welcome in the other ethno states. So that's
we can start it in Hawaii, because there's already a lot of people there that are
tons. But you know, to be super edgy, I'll make the point that it's not an unfounded fear. Like there was real sabotage during World War II by some German and Japanese people of mixed ancestry. And, you know, as I've said, people are tribal by nature. We have that assumption. If there were some conflict suddenly with China and you see Chinese people, you know, you'd be right to be concerned about their allegiance. And the problem with people of mixed race that the sort of ethnostate people would talk about is that they tend to undermine the collective identity of that society. They tend to be for either progressive ideologies or libertarian ideologies that seek to strip away traditional heritage, traditional identity. And they do this because they don't feel welcome. Like, for example, half people in Japan would say, oh, we shouldn't keep all of these traditional Japanese practices. We should be more open to international and other countries, because that way they'll feel like they fit in more. So that's the sort of the argument against having too many mixed race people, or really it's the argument against miscegenation in general. And my argument, I don't make a big thing about race mixing, but I do think that probably the best case for it is that of the immigrant. If you're living in another country, you shouldn't try to maintain a foreign bloodline. In that case, I think it's very legitimate. But it's up to that society to limit their number of immigrants. You can't take too many immigrants and maintain your society.
That is interesting, because people have asked me whether I feel more Asian or more white. It doesn't matter like what I look like, but like how I feel, I guess.
Yeah.
And even though I grew up in the United States, when I was in Asia, I felt way more comfortable. So I feel like I feel more comfortable with my Asian side, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm closer to my mom's side of my family than my dad's side. And then Shane, didn't you say you feel like you're more white?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how that.
Yeah, because I lived with my dad for most of my life, and my dad and birth mother, they divorced when I was young. So
yeah.
I don't really know hardly anything about my mom's side of it. So.
Well, you don't need to worry about it living in the States. You know, America is meant to be some melting pot, right? So you can just kind of self-identify however you want. Isn't that the thing now with gender?
Well,
can't you do that with race?
Melting pot. Well, a melting pot, but it depends on exactly what you're melting with, because you know, with the politics nowadays, obviously you're not going to have people who are anti-Trump, pro-Trump live together, because that's just going to be impossible. And then, you know, even some cultures, they can't mesh well. So.
Well, the melting pot idea is pretty much dead at this point. You know, I think there was actually a really great. I wrote a post about this recently. There was a Korean woman who's a writer for, I think, HuffPo, who had this Twitter thread where she talked about how she suffered all these indignities growing up in the United States because she's Asian, and how people made fun of her father. And then she talked about how the movie Crazy Rich Asians came out. And she started. Yeah, it was so lame. It was like the cheesiest, lamest thing ever. I responded to that. I said that her thread is a really, really good argument against multiculturalism, because what she's basically saying is that the melting pot is bullshit. She tried to assimilate and hated it, absolutely hated it. So what she wants is for all of the white kids in her school and in her community to affirm and accept her culture. And what she really wanted was her own ethnic gang to join, which she did in college, and then she felt comfortable. And so basically the melting pot is kind of bullshit if we take them at their word.
Yeah, and when I was in school, I mostly hung out with half Asians or other Asians. So I don't know if that has to do with that, but I guess I was self-segregating
Did you ever
in some way.
Did you ever get questions about, hey, do you eat dog and cat?
Yeah. Or do you ride an elephant to school? What the hell?
Yeah. Are you good at violin? I don't know.
Yeah, or am I good at math? I'm like, oh, that's a funny one. Yeah, I'm
2
terrible.
plus 2 is what, 6, I
terrible at
think?
math.
Yeah, I'm terrible at rap and I'm awful at basketball. So, I kind of fucked that up too.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
We're not fitting in any of the stereotypes. This
No,
isn't
we're
working.
both outsiders.
Well, that's fine. The thing I would ask, though, I guess, what's your opinion on this? Like, for a Chinese kid growing up in the States, if they feel like an outsider, is it just like tough? You're in America now, deal with it, or is it up to Americans to find a way to affirm their Chinese culture and heritage?
I think, well, I guess one thing that I would think about is if their family is Chinese, then shouldn't their family should probably have like a network of, if they're trying to like, maintain their Chinese culture within the United States, then they would have that kind of community there already. But also at the same time, if you're living in another country that is not China, obviously, then assimilate to that culture. You can assimilate to that culture and still keep your own culture, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. You speak to kind of an interesting difference between Chinese immigrants and other immigrants. China, because it's so populous, they have the ability to kind of just flood other countries with their diaspora to just, set up sort of cells in every country. And there's a lot of concern about this. They're taking over Canada, they're taking over parts of Australia, buying up all the real estate, getting all their people to become licensed agents and getting into local government. So, this is their sort of soft way of conquering the West. Just mentioning that so that you guys can be a little more paranoid. But if you're an immigrant and you go to a country and you already have a network of your countrymen, it's a very different experience than someone like myself going to Japan and there's like no other Black people. And so I think the question of can you maintain your heritage or do you have to assimilate? I think that's kind of a false dichotomy. I think the distinction I make is really between the public and the private. I think privately, if you want to be super Christian and speak your language and dress your dress, do what you want, sure. Yeah. But I think in public, at work, out in society, you should try to show some loyalty to the society you've joined because, you didn't grow up there, you didn't help build it. You're sort of a guest in a way. And I think, you're not entitled, like as an Indian person or a Black person, you're not entitled to feel at home in the middle of Japan. It's a whole other country, and I feel that way in general about immigration. Yeah.
I think that's a good way to explain it because privately you can practice your own, whatever you want to do. You're in a free society, right? But if you're out in public, you shouldn't expect other people to already know things that they didn't grow up with if that's the majority culture. So you should be polite and assimilate to that culture or at least know the difference and know where to act,
Be respectful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I speak Japanese and I bow in public when I have to. I've been here so long that I'm doing that thing where I bow on the phone now, which is bad.
Yeah. When my brother came back from Japan, he started bowing and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing?
I see people doing that on the phone all the time. They're like talking to their boss or something and they're bowing like crazy. And I'm like, dude, he can't see you. Chill. It's all good. But no, they're set in their ways, man. So I try to assimilate to the degree possible, but I don't have any illusions. I'm not like Kanada-jin-san. I don't have any, pretense that I'm going to someday become Japanese. Nah, I'm a Black guy from New York. I'm always going to be who I am.
Is there anything about the United States that you miss? Or is it pretty much just whatever, you don't give a fuck anymore?
I haven't totally washed my hands of it. That's why I'm doing political YouTube chats in English. So I still follow stuff. I still troll people online and write about things. I travel a lot. I miss occasional some food. I miss going to Yankees games every now and then. I miss little things, but I don't intend to move back. I think long term for building my own sort of legacy and family, I want to stay here. I feel like this is a better long term bet, at least for my own standing. I think the United States still has a lot of potential. It's a mess right now. Politically, I think it's a complete mess, but there's a lot of potential, and I'm interested to see where things go.
So I have a question about food then, because you mentioned it.
Sure.
So first, what's your favorite food from the United States, and then what's your favorite food from Japan?
Oh, fun question. Okay, from the States. Uh, I'm a big mac and cheese fan. I do a lot of things with it. There's if you just get like the shitty Kraft mac and cheese and then add stuff to it, like add real cheese and like broccoli or bacon bits. That's kind of my little indulgence. I'm a big macaroni guy. I like cheese in general. You can improve any food basically by just adding cheese and bacon. So that's probably my favorite American thing. For Japanese food, there's a wonderful roast pork food called tonkatsu that I eat a lot. That's pretty great. Also ramen. There's a lot of good ramen places. I just love ramen. That's a classic one. That's what I go with. Yeah. How about you?
Well, actually, I make tonkatsu at home, but
Oh, cool.
probably not as good as the Japanese people, but you know.
Well, no, hey, if you can cook, that's already in your favor. I've heard bad things about Western American women on that point, so that's good.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty sad? It's like the standards are so low that if like you're not fat and you can cook, then you're automatically like better than everyone else.
Yeah, Shane's already won the lottery. Basically, you've got
Yeah, she better know how to cook.
a not fat girl that can cook. That's pretty good.
Yeah, she's a woman and she knows how to cook. That's right.
Right. Exactly. Good. No, you got to maintain frame. Absolutely. One thing I would add on that point, I actually had a post about this on Twitter, where there was a Japanese virtual like doll that you could buy, like a virtual girlfriend that would like greet you in the morning. It would say nice things to you, and it would say nice things when you came home from work. There's just this little ornament that you could hang, this little virtual girlfriend. And there are all these joke posts about how, oh, this is going to reduce the birth rate even more because all the Japanese guys are going to buy this and they're not going to try to get a girlfriend. And actually, the Japanese government also had a statement about it where they were worried about it. And I wrote a post about this saying, it's amazing how little men ask of women, how little they actually want from women. That a man would buy some little virtual doll that doesn't cook or clean or have sex with, it doesn't do anything. All it does is it's cheerful to them for a little bit in the morning and at night. That a man would buy something like that and then conclude, I don't need a girlfriend or a wife at all, because that's all I need, right? And I would give this advice to women all around the world. I would say, look, you don't have to be a sex goddess, you don't have to be pretty, you don't have to be smart, you don't have to know how to do jack shit. If you're just nice to a guy, if you're just cheerful and nice, he will be your slave for the rest of his life. That's it.
Be your slave.
That is like a good comment on how sad the state of like, I guess, between the sexes is now.
It's bad. It's bad.
That's really bad.
It's gotten bad, and it's there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things that are getting in the way of it correcting itself. I don't know if you guys have ever read Dawkins, like The Selfish Gene. There's a really good chapter in there that explains sort of the problem, where he talks about selection, male-female mate selection, and how the problem is that the sexes have conflicting motivations and optimal mating behavior, because men obviously don't have to go through pregnancy, though, so they want to spread their seed, and women want to try to win investment from the highest status males possible. So what happens is you have these waves of different strategies being optimal for different times. And right now we're in a really bad kind of valley where, unfortunately, the optimal strategy is very deceitful. A lot of deceit from both sexes, and it's led to a lot of problems. But the main problem, I think, is just in Western societies, like, we forgot that there are differences between men and women. That men and women are fundamentally different, and because we believe that they're identical, we have all these sort of false narratives and false ideas. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about.
Well,
It's actually made me very sympathetic to feminists and to women in general. When I studied more about gender differences and realized just how different men and women really are.
Well, see, now you're talking about science, and
Yeah,
you know how many genders there are?
6,000.
Yeah, come on now.
I thought there are as many genders as there are stars in the sky.
Yeah, basically, I mean, Jesus Christ, it's ridiculous. Climate change. Oh yeah, 100% real. Gender? Nah, it's a social construct. What?
Yeah, that is kind of curious. It is curious. Yeah, once you get into the science, it excludes a lot of political narratives. But most people don't really care about science. So,
Well, If it's about certain things, then they do. But you're pretty much right. They don't care about science.
Yeah, I mean, there's just narratives on both sides. There's some things where they pretend to care, but most people don't really study it. And this is the thing that is the problem with democracy. I think this is also a Churchill quote. The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter.
Yeah, because everyone's going to have different, values and things they like and things they don't like. So when the majority votes for something, there's that minority that will
be forced.
Yeah, they're like, I don't like this, but I kind of have to now because.
Well, there's a solution. There's a solution for that. What you should do, if you're going to have democracy, and I completely unironically think this, you should do what Starship Troopers does, where you force people, if they want to vote, they have to sign up for a draft. They have to register and be willing to perform some kind of national service. Not just the draft, but they should also have to do some volunteer work. They should have to pass a civics exam and be healthy. They should have to be. They have to be able to be physically accountable for their vote. Because you guys are libertarians, I think you would agree that voting is an act of political violence to some extent. It involves force. It involves who the government points guns at. And so I would argue that if you want to have the privilege of influencing that, for it to not be a moral hazard, you have to be willing to enact that violence yourself. You have to be willing to lace up the boots and point a gun at your neighbors if you want to force them to do what you think is necessary politically. So I think that the Starship Troopers idea is actually a good one.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it because, you're pretty much right. Like we're saying, the majority ruling on the minority. But if they're willing to vote for something, knowing that it's going to win or whatever the issue is, like you were saying, if
it could end in force,
right?
So
yes,
yeah, then they have to do something in order to, I guess, make that vote count or something. I'm not really sure.
They have to be able to be physically accountable for their vote. They have to be able to enact the violence that their vote represents. This is the idea in Starship Troopers that only citizens can vote, and you only become a citizen through military service. You don't have to be that strict. The implementation details can vary, but the basic idea of, if you're going to use force, which is voting, then you have to be willing to do it yourself. I kind of liken it to, I would argue that if you're not willing to hunt and kill and butcher an animal yourself, then you shouldn't eat meat. You shouldn't be eating meat at all. If you're only able to eat meat because of factory farms and all the disgusting things they do, then you'll eat meat. But you're not willing to kill an animal yourself because you're against hunting. I'd say that's a moral hazard. I'd say that's also wrong. And, I can actually make this even edgier and say it's actually an argument against women voting as well, because women in general aren't physically as capable of violence as men are. And so having women vote is also kind of a moral hazard, you could argue, because they're voting for things like, let's let in lots of refugees. And then when they become violent, they're not going to fight the refugees. They're going to, go run to their men and say, hey, fight those guys for me that I voted to come in. So, there's another moral hazard there that is corrected by not allowing women to vote or making them pass some kind of physical, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and that whole refugee thing, that example you mentioned, a lot of the people who are, voting for, bringing the refugees in, are they themselves going to bring in refugees into their own homes? No, I doubt it. Highly doubt it.
Of course not. It's all going to be outsourced. That's the problem when you have violence by proxy and accountability by proxy. You can vote for all of these unsustainable things that you have no intention of actually paying for yourself. It's always someone else paying for it. It's the same thing if you let, a 10-year-old drive your car, run the family budget. They're going to do all of these things that they can't be responsible for. They physically, literally can't be responsible for it. And yet when things go bad, you're going to say, hey, why'd you do that? They're going to say, well, someone else will clean up the mess. So that's the problem.
Pay their fair share, as Bernie Sanders likes to say.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of like how a lot of the celebrities endorse like, oh, we need to help refugees and everything, and then they go off into their mansion and don't take in any refugees.
It's like that Paul Joseph Watson video where he was talking about that. He's like, how many refugees did so and so bring in? None.
No, they're not going to their houses. They only care about minorities when it affects their day-to-day lives. When, like, for example, when they were worried about, there was, I think Amber Heard had a tweet about, oh, I saw a checkpoint for ICE. Make sure you call your nannies.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I recall shit for it.
That's kind of like the tweet.
Yeah. Well, she was trying to be nice, and Samantha Bee, I believe her husband, got in trouble because they were voting against opening up their private school to more minority students. When it comes to school board budgets and to having too many, non-white kids into your elite magnet schools, they get really red-pilled on race very quickly. A lot of lefties.
Well, it's like that Bill Burr joke about Republicans and Democrats. It's like, I like Republicans more because I know they don't like me. Democrats aren't trying to hide behind a mask. Oh yeah, I love you. And then once they vote them in or whatever, and they turn around and stab you in the back.
Well, reality, eventually catches up with a lot of people as they get older, and particularly as they have families. So I asked you how it is you became more libertarian, because usually as people get older, they become more conservative. They become more, like their parents. And I think the thing that'll probably make you guys more conservative is after you have your own children of your own, you start thinking about, I'm not so libertarian now when I have my 4-year-old stepping over hypodermic needles and listening to, crazy stuff in the apartment next door. The whole behind closed doors thing kind of dies away when it's your own family and progeny you're thinking about.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about that because the person who we mentioned in the beginning, Dave Smith, who runs the Part of the Problem podcast, he was more of an open borders guy before, and now he's having a child, and he said he's kind of repositioned himself on that and also the abortion issue. So
yep, absolutely. Children changes you fundamentally in a big way, and there's one of the reasons it does is because it forces you to think about the world beyond your own lifespan, beyond just the next 5 years. You have to start thinking about the next 100 years and your sort of posterity and legacy. And I think there's an old saying, I don't know if it's an Italian saying, but there's an expression like, you can gauge the quality of society by the number of old men who plant trees that they themselves will never get to sit under. The concern about the future. And it's one of the problems with Western society today is that people only care about themselves. They only care about the next 5 years. So they're very easily led by demagogues and politicians promising them all kinds of goodies. But when you have your own children, it's one of the reasons, in general, I don't take seriously the political opinions of people who don't have families. I just generally don't. But when you guys get married and have your own kids, especially Nicolette, you'll become a lot more conservative, I assure you.
Yeah, that's probably true. I don't know about everything, but I know for myself, I guess I would consider myself more traditional, but then on some things, I wouldn't force anyone else to be like me. And that, I guess that's the libertarian version of my ideology. But a lot of the things that I believe, if I say it, then people just argue with me about it. So
yeah, almost everything that she ever tweets about, there's always going to be someone like, you're stupid. You know what you're talking about.
That's everyone. That's fine. I've been called a Nazi a million times online, so I don't really worry about that. But what I'm saying is that having children will put to test all of your libertarian ideals like nothing else will. It's very easy to say everyone live and let live, whatever, until it's your kid being fucked with at school or on the street or in some other aspect of society. Then you start thinking, you know what? Maybe we need some rules. Maybe we need to actually standardize some shit.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way in terms of libertarianism, but I would kind of make the argument that libertarianism, because you were saying that with rules and everything, and there's that misconception about libertarians that they just want people to do whatever they want, and
that's not true.
They just want to smoke weed and do whatever you want really freely, peace, man, that kind of thing. And
dude, weed.
Yeah, and we don't even smoke weed, but whatever.
What kind of shitty libertarians are you?
I know, right?
See, that's the thing too.
You smoke weed.
How dare you? What you say you're libertarian, but you don't smoke weed? It's like, well, if you want to smoke weed, we see the science behind it. We see how it helps people. Dude, that's awesome. We want it to be legal. Awesome, decriminalize it. Don't put people in a cage because you have a plant in your house.
I'm just saying you're doing it wrong. If you're not 420 blazing it right now.
It's like a tattoo artist who doesn't have any tattoos. Like, what the fuck?
I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't get a tattoo from a guy who doesn't have any. I wouldn't listen to a libertarian that's not high. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, I guess you're gonna have to. No, I'm just kidding. People always. I get weird DMs. They're like, "So do you smoke weed?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't. Sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't smoke weed."
I actually see where you're coming from, though. I agree. Yes, you can have a libertarian society with rules. There's a distinction between culture and the political system, and that's certainly true. The problem is, again, the sustainability of it. Even if you have a really great culture, if you have a legal system that's just like anarchy, that's just everybody do whatever, then all it takes is a little bit of migration or a little bit of generational change or a natural disaster to completely upend that society, right? So it's hard to maintain, it's hard to preserve, it's hard for it to have any kind of lasting depth if you don't also have a government with certain standards. So, libertarianism, there have been small experiments, sort of communitarian, like, communes and things like that. But at the scale of hundreds of millions of people, you need laws. That's just how it works.
Yeah, I definitely believe there's a place for government for sure. I don't think it should be this authoritarian, completely rule over your life type of thing. But I definitely
should be like protect the citizens.
Yeah. I think there's obviously, for me, and I'm sure a lot of libertarians or anarchists who listen to this, because we've had anarchists on.
We've had a lot of anarchists on, and then people assume that we're ANCAP.
Yeah, so just because we have them, we're like that. But anyway,
well, you're not ANCAP, right?
And I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's anarchists who think, oh, well, you're two states because a place for government. They hyperventilate, like, oh my God, government, bleh,
Well, how do you feel about like the issues like discrimination? Like, for example, the tech censorship platforms like Google and Facebook kicking conservatives off. Do you think the government should intervene in that sort of thing, or do you think the market should try to settle it?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for that issue, I'm really stuck on that because on one hand, they are, obviously they're private companies, but they're also monopolies. And then there'll also be companies that emerge after them because it's constantly changing. So I don't really know what the answer is to that, but maybe have a different opinion on that.
Well, that's kind of how I feel too, because that whole private company argument is just so, it's been played on so many times. People have heard it like, oh yeah, whatever. They can do whatever they want. Fuck it. But yeah, I'm sure you've heard that too, but I don't know, like the government coming in, and because who knows what the government would say if they come in and regulate it.
Will it get worse though? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. And okay. So obviously with the whole Alex Jones thing, obviously, whatever, all the things that happened to him, whatever, were not great, whatever.
Sure.
So what's the end goal here? So, okay, obviously there's a lot of people who don't like him. Great. Fantastic. But you're only going to care when it's someone that you like. Like, say, I don't know, like say, for example, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some leftist person that they would, people would get crazy over. Like, I don't know, Vox, for example. If Vox are getting their stuff deplatformed, whatever, all the Vox people are like, hey, freedom of speech. Why can't they have the stuff on Facebook?
Well,
Vox is gonna. Okay, so first of all, Vox.com, you can still go to that website, and then they'll go to like Minds or something like that, some other platform that they can go to, or
Mastodon.
Yeah, Mastodon, right? Will Wheaton, yeah, I'm sure he loves them now. But
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, well, it's one of those platforms that because
it's a super like left wing version of Twitter, basically.
Yeah, Will. Okay,
wow.
He was not left wing enough to be on Mastodon, so he was banned.
That's the most redundant phrase I've ever heard. A left wing version of Twitter.
I know, right?
No, they're like full on like I don't even know what they apparently Will Wheaton was too much of a Nazi for them.
Yeah. Okay. So they're like Super Saiyan 3 lefty. I get it.
Basically.
Okay. That's all well and good. The thing is, first of all, I just think it's like really adorable the way hardcore leftists instantly become private property absolutists.
Right.
When they see tech monopolies censoring private speech, then they become absolutists about the sanctity of private property. In any other sphere of life, healthcare or any other issue, private property is up for debate. It's all communal. It's all about the government to regulate everything. But when they see their ideological enemies being persecuted, on a dime they turn and they become all about the absolute belief in private property, which I think is just fucking adorable. Yeah, go ahead.
No, and that's why I was saying if it was one of their people like Vox, like I was saying, then they'll be like, well freedom of speech, and why can't you be, they'd be hyperventilating. It's so stupid.
Well, what you've identified is that is a much more worrying trend, which is that we have completely abandoned any notion of principles, any notion of ideological consistency. We are regressing into a state of pure tribal warfare, my gang good, your gang bad, in which principles don't really have any sort of abstract meaning. They're sort of just word salad weapons that are thrown around to incur doubt and frustration. They don't actually last in people's minds in some sort of meaningful way. So that's bad because it didn't used to be quite that bad, but it's becoming nakedly more so because of the internet, because of everything predicted by our good friend Kojima in Metal Gear Solid 2. Only the elite will understand that reference. But in any event, the problem is that principles are gone, and this free speech thing is not going to work itself out by the market. Facebook has been on top for many years. It's not going away anytime soon. And even when if it does go away, there's no guarantee that the company that replaces it is going to care about free speech. So unfortunately, the libertarian position on private company censorship is basically tough. Deal with it. Hope that it goes away after a few years, after your livelihood is wrecked and your ideas have been silenced and elections have been turned and a whole new generation of politicians has come in. Hope that it just goes away. And I don't think that that's a satisfying answer for most people.
Do you think that eventually this will come to some sort of collapse in our society, or at least in the West?
I don't think there's going to be a collapse anytime soon. Not barring some sort of crazy diplomatic turn in foreign relations or a natural disaster. The West, in terms of infrastructure and wealth, is still very powerful. What's more likely is a gradual transformation through ideological change and censorship, through migration, changes in birth rates and fertility and migration patterns. There'll be a slow transformation. There's some pushback. You're seeing some right-wing parties in Europe. You're seeing anti-immigration sentiment in the United States. That's why we have Trump. So, we'll see if those trends grow or if they kind of fizzle. But I don't see any kind of wide, total collapse in the near future. But I do think there will be, this might sound ominous, but I do think there will be a return to a more traditional sort of patriarchal society, both in the West and around the world. And it'll either happen very quickly, which will be unpleasant, or it'll happen gradually just by looking at birth rates and technological trends. I actually do think that the growth of AI, which I contribute to through my consulting work, is going to put a lot of people out of work and force people to reevaluate their value systems and governments. And when you look at birth rates and political behavior of countries like China and India, the Middle East, their migratory patterns and fertility patterns, it's very probable that white cultures, I mean, they're not just going to die, but they're going to be transformed gradually. And that's going to lead to political change. So those are sort of the high-level trends that I see, barring, again, massive natural disaster, aliens, or war. I mean, that's obviously the big possibility. But that's kind of how I see it.
I think you're right on the AI theory, or with jobs being replaced by things that can be automated, because I can see that happening already in circles that I'm in. So I think a lot of people will have to reevaluate how they're going to structure who goes to work and what jobs they're going to go for. And
yeah, there's a lot of bullshit jobs. That's the problem in our economy. There's a lot of bullshit jobs, a lot of just kind of like office, push paper, look important jobs. And unfortunately, again, not to sound mean, but those jobs are done more by women than men. Like the harder, real, meaningful work of maintaining society, of building infrastructure, like maintaining sewage systems, building bridges, most of that stuff is done by men. And those jobs aren't going to be automated as easily because lives depend on them. So I think the intelligent society that get ahead of the curve will find ways to incentivize more women to stay home by encouraging a culture, saying, hey, you're doing valuable work, instead of pretending that it's not worthwhile, and saying, look, we don't want robots raising our kids. We should have their mothers raise them. And I think that's the intelligent thing to do, to get ahead of that change. Long term, I know I'm sort of pessimistic. I don't think our species will get through the Great Filter. I'm familiar with the concept of the Great Filter.
No, what is that?
The Great Filter is very high level. It's sort of an answer as to why we might not met with any other intelligent life in the universe. Basically, for society to become spacefaring and travel across galaxies, they have to reach a very high level of technological development. And the probability of society destroying themselves through their own technology approaches 1 as they get to that necessary level. So basically, the Great Filter is that before we start colonizing other planets, we're going to wipe ourselves out in some horrific way, or possibly gradually. And we're like a tweet or two away from nuclear war now, as it is. So I think long term, I'm more pessimistic. Just again, our level of rationality and our sort of the cognitive hardware we have, I'm not optimistic. But over the short term, we'll see.
It's kind of funny. You start talking about robots and then you started roboting.
Yeah, your
I
voice
did?
started going in and out.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're on to me.
You started
know, right?
sounding like a robot.
Yeah.
I see how it is. You're
I
actually,
apologize for that. My internet is usually pretty good here in Tokyo, but it could be latency because I'm very far.
could be us too. I'm not sure.
Yeah, as a lot of people know, we are very bad at technology. So
And it's also
Well,
raining and thunderstorming
True,
here. So.
true.
you libertarians are shitty at maintaining infrastructure, right? And it takes a lot to keep a fiber optic high speed internet working around the world. Like I said, it just takes one bad natural disaster, one shark eating an underwater cable or something like that. Our society is far more fragile than people realize, and even more so in terms of gender. Technology has exacerbated gender differences a lot more. People think that men and women are more equal today. They're actually a lot less equal. Because if you think about who owns the guns, who's trained in martial arts, who knows how to use the technology to maintain society, in a tribal band that's in the woods, there's more gender equality than in modern societies today. So our societies are incredibly fragile in ways that people don't understand. So the only general advice I would give about the future is get into prepping.
I was going to ask because you mentioned natural disasters. So you're in Tokyo, and wasn't there like a huge
Yes.
tropical storm through? Like, are you guys okay? Like, I saw some videos, and it looked kind of crazy.
This summer, you're in Japan. Wasn't there? Yes, because there was crazy rainstorms. There was a heat wave that killed like 100 people. There was an earthquake just a couple of days ago, right? Basically, God is feeling some kind of way about Japan over the last few weeks. So yeah, that's been bad.
It's their damn immigration.
Yeah, that's exactly. They haven't taken enough refugees.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys better
open up some borders.
Start bringing in more like 1 million people now instead of just 1,000 or something.
It helps that they're an island country. It's not easy to sneak in.
That's true.
What they're planning to do is they're actually going to boost the number of foreign workers. They're going to take in, I think like half a million like Filipino nurses to deal with all their old people, because they have a lot of old people. And I think they have a preference for female workers because they marry into the culture. They change their names and they assimilate. But they're taking in more foreign workers. I know that. They've made it a little easier. These sort of targeted boosts in immigration, I think, make sense in the short term because they literally have a shrinking population at this point. But long term, if they want to stay Japan, they're going to have to solve the fertility issue or replace people with robots.
Robots, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because the whole Filipino side of my family, they're all nurses and doctors, so that kind of that's funny.
Why you no doctor?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, why aren't you a doctor? What's wrong with you?
I am in healthcare, so that counts. So.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Groovy. Yeah, I think that's, I have a lot of respect for Filipinos. There's a lot of them actually in Tokyo, and they're some of the hardest working people ever. They, assimilate really well. They learn the language perfectly in a year. I actually wrote a blog post about this, about white entitlement, how the only foreigners who live in Japan for a long time and don't learn Japanese are white people.
Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah. There was this British guy who wrote a blog post about how he hated Japan. He lived there for 10 years, and he was complaining about how they don't have gender equality and the police are so mean and they don't have multiculturalism. And I'm like, dude, you're living in Japan. Did you realize that you're in a foreign country? Right? This attitude of I can go anywhere in the world and feel at home because my culture is the global default is unique to white people. It's like the very definition of white privilege. You don't hear other foreigners in Japan bitch about the culture. Indians, Pakistan, whoever, they all come here and they work their asses off.
So there is some sort of white entitlement or white I don't know, like expectation of white foreigners who go to other countries.
And it's also another one of those instances where, like you're saying, gender equality and multiculturalism, that's just a Western, it looks like it's just a Western problem or whatever it is.
No, all of that stuff is. All of that stuff. Westerners are very solipsistic. That's the thing. They think that their way of thinking is universal and just the right default. But the thing is, like, if you travel a bit, I'll give you an example for my own sake because I'm black. One thing you realize is that most of the world is racist. Like by default, if you go to Africa, you go to Asia, you go to South America, most people think race is real and think very real differences depend on it. Most people are racist. Most people believe sex matters and there's only two of them. Most people have very traditional views, even in our globalized society. 7 billion people, 90% of them are very traditional on these issues. It's only in the West where there's some debate about this stuff.
Yeah, and people are always talking about like, oh, do you experience racism for being Asian, blah, 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 or whatever. And then like same thing with my friends too. But it seems to me that I experience way more racism from the Asian community or Asian side of my family. And
Yeah.
same thing with my even like my full Asian friends who interact with like Asians from Asia. They experience more racism that way than the other way around. So
Asians are far more racist than whites are. I mean, that's not even debatable, really. But Africans are more racist. If I go to Nigeria, I'm going to be treated like crap, but because of my cultural attitudes, not because of my skin color. But they also understand that racially, I'm not the same as them. I have 20% European admixture. I did my 23andMe, so like most American blacks, I'm lighter than most Africans. But if I were to go to South America, I would experience racism as well. Racism and tribalism are literally in our DNA. They helped us to survive in small groups in forests and mountains, knowing that this person is of my tribe and this person is not. Being able to make that distinction in a split second kept you alive, and that's why it's so deeply embedded in our psychology. It's not going to go away no matter how many rallies we have or how many Twitter shaming campaigns we do. We're kind of stuck with that software for a while.
Wakanda forever.
Well, I mean, sorry, it kind of depends on forever here. Like, it's possible to hack human hardware and software to some extent. If we get really futuristic, kind of cyberpunk, we can engineer ourselves to be gender egalitarian, racially neutral entities that live forever and traverse virtual worlds. But at that point, we're no longer talking about Homo sapiens. We're talking about some other entity. And my concern about the sustainability of human societies is premised on societies made up of Homo sapiens. When we become some other entity, they'll have new problems to deal with.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh.
Mm.
The only reason why I was saying the Wakanda Forever was because of the whole Black Panther movies. Apparently, I don't know. I was just thinking about that for some reason because you're talking about Africa and how they treat you different because of your culture. The way you present yourself, and not just because your skin color, but with Black Panther. And
yes,
your movie guy, whatever. Black Panther is just the greatest movie ever. Apparently,
it's really not. It's awful. I've seen probably literally every movie. I'm a big movie buff. I've probably read every book too. I read super fast, so if you ever want to reference something, I'm down to geek out about it. But yeah, I see your point there. Vastly overrated Black Panther. Very mediocre film. The action was awful. The effects were terrible. Very cliche plot. I like that it wasn't as quippy as the other Marvel movies. It was relatively serious. But yeah, not so great. I'm sorry. Do you guys have to go? I feel like we've been talking a long time.
Yeah, we usually end it after like an hour and a half. But
okay, cool.
Yeah, if you need to do something else today, then
so I'm supposed to do another chat with this black guy named Obsidian. He does
you have another live stream at like 9 your time or at 9 your guys' time
at 10 a.m. my time, which is 2 minutes from now. But I actually just got an email from him. He said he needs to start an hour later. So that kind of I'm actually free for the next hour if you still want to shoot the shit or
no, we can talk about Black Panther because I was just gonna say that I think, and I don't know if you'd agree, but Michael B. Jordan, his performance was by far the best part of the movie.
He was good. Yeah, I liked him. I think he was had some good personality and he was an interesting villain. It's funny because there were a lot of black people on Twitter that were unironically rooting for him and wanted him to take over the world and reset everything for Wakanda or whatever. But I think that the politics were kind of shitty. Like they end the movie with him saying, "Oh, we're gonna try to open up to the world" and all of that. I really hope in the next movie they have to deal with refugee crisis from Africa. That would be amazing if they actually had to dig into the real politics of what would happen if you had a successful, wealthy country in the middle of Africa with open borders. I mean, that would be pretty fascinating.
Do you think they would actually do that though?
As a movie, no, I don't think so. Marvel and Disney, they wear their politics on their sleeve. I think we know where they're going to go with it.
That's so crazy.
It ruined the last Star Wars movie too. The Last Jedi was awful.
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
I don't know if you saw, but we had
terrible.
We did a live stream with
my
birthday, and we talked about that for a little bit. And Scott Horton, he's a big anti-war guy, he was just he was just rolling off on how terrible that movie was. It was great because he's pretty bad. I mean, 8 was just such a disappointment.
It was. It really just shat all over the entire franchise, and my expectations were really low because I thought The Force Awakens was also really bad. I thought that was dreck. But at the least, the one good thing I would say about The Force Awakens is that the movie demonstrated a love of Star Wars itself, even if it didn't have a very good plot, and even if Rey was kind of a boring Mary Sue character, you could tell in the practical effects and in the structure of the story that it was made by someone who wanted to respect the fans. With Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi, it felt like it was made by a hack, because his priority, and he said this many times in interviews, his number one priority was to not let people guess what was going to happen. He wanted to subvert expectations. And when you make that your priority, 9 times out of 10, you're going to come up with complete dreck, a completely awful story. And that's what happened with The Last Jedi. You know, here's an opportunity to have an interesting moment between Luke and Rey. Let's have him throw the lightsaber. Okay, he's going to train her. No, he's not. She's perfect. She already knows everything. Okay, she's going to join with Kylo. No, he's not. All right, we're going to learn about Snoke. Interesting guy. Oh, he's dead. Oh, what about Rey's parents? That could be interesting. Nope, no, don't care about that at all. Okay, well, maybe Leia's going to die or something. Oh, nope, she's got Super Saiyan powers. She lives forever. Okay, great. Now there'll be a duel between Luke and Kylo. Oh, nope, no duel. Okay, great. So, like, literally every possible interesting moment that came up, it's like they figured out what's the most anticlimactic, boring thing we can do with it. And they picked that thing and did it.
Yeah, it was, oh man, it was crazy because that Leia thing, for example, was like, that would have been perfect. You know, just her, like Kylo had some indirect link to her death. That would be great. You know, something, you know, to kind of give that some, I don't know, some heat or something like that. But no, like you're saying, Super Saiyan, Mary Poppins bullshit. And
yeah,
I'm still alive. Well, actually, I'm not, because, you know, I'm
in a coma for the whole time.
And I'm dead in real life.
Until I don't need to be, right? No, there's not a single scene that bears any scrutiny. From the moment with the jokey fight scene in the beginning, where a ship full of anti-aircraft guns can't shoot down one fighter, like, and then the light speed ramming thing. Like, this is the problem with bad sequels. Bad sequels don't just make for one bad movie; they ruin all of the movies that came before it, right? So because of this light speed ramming thing, it makes literally every other space battle retarded. So, you know, it's a movie that aggressively goes out of its way to say, hey, you're a Star Wars fan? I'm just going to shit on everything that you love and care about and do something totally hacky. It's an example of the plot that was teased would have been far better than the plot that we got. And there's a lot of things that are like that. Like Star Wars, the Last Jedi, the early trailers teased what could have been an interesting plot, and then you ended up with a terrible, terrible movie. There are a few other examples of that. That's why I mentioned it that way.
Well, I will say too that I think it would have been best if they had just plotted it all out for all 3 of the movies instead of just, you know, J.J. Abrams and whoever else, you know, behind the scenes of 7 doing that movie and then saying, okay, Rian Johnson, you figure out what happens next, you know, because they didn't have any plan for it. It was just, oh shit, we have Star Wars now. Oh fuck, Force Awakens, here it is. We gotta do something. And then now they have to do, you know, like 2-3 movies. It's basically Marvel. You know, we have 2-3 movies out now. Star Wars, It's like Star Wars wasn't meant to be this grand, massive universe or whatever. It was just supposed to be about these characters and, you know, this box. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, and 8 had, you know, like you were saying, it had a great premise. There was something there with the trailer. It was great, you know.
Yeah, the trailer,
you know, it would have been nice though if Luke Skywalker did turn his back on the Force and the Jedi. Well, awesome. You know, we'll figure out why. You know, something bad happened or something. You know, it would have been even better if Luke was actually had some part in 7 instead of just being at the very end of it.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of mistakes with that movie. I mean, it's just a complete mess, and the political stuff is the least of it. You know, the casino thing and the feminist stuff, like that's the least of it. It's bad and lame, and it doesn't add anything. But the main problem with the movie is that it was just boring. Like nothing important happened. There's so many subplots that didn't lead anywhere. The mutiny, and then the codebreaker thing, and he had all these sort of dead end plots that again come from prioritizing subverting expectations. As long as you can't guess what's going to happen, it's good. Well, no, that's not how writing works, right? This has been a problem in Hollywood for a while. I think particularly since the late 90s with Fight Club and The Matrix and, you know, movies that have had big turns in them. People all want to do that. And it's ironically, it's led to a lot of very predictable movies, you know, movies that all have that same structure of obviously there's going to be a betrayal, there's going to be the person they work for is going to be the bad guy, like in the last Incredibles movie. You know, it's very plain and boring. And if you'd just gone with what you teased, you'd have had something a lot better. It ruined the last Metal Gear Solid game too, which is my second Metal Gear reference in this chat. I'll try to stop dropping them, but it ruined that game as well, which is frustrating.
Yeah, and it leaves a gaping hole. And okay, well, what are they gonna do with 9? Do I care? Not really.
No, I don't care. I'm not gonna watch it.
I don't like. I would be really surprised if episode 9. I mean, I'm sure based off a name alone, it's still going to make good money, but I don't see it making anywhere near as much as 7 and 8.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't. I hope they abandon this Ryan Johnson experiment. It hasn't worked for anyone. I really enjoy talking movies with you guys. Have you seen? I'm going to name 5 movies that I did really quick paragraph reviews for. I want to see if you agree with me. Let me see if you've seen any of these movies. All right. Okay. Avengers: Infinity War.
Yes.
Yep.
Deadpool 2.
Yes.
Mission Impossible: Fallout.
No.
No.
Incredibles 2.
No.
Isle of Dogs.
No, but I really wanted to see that. I wasn't able.
You should see that. It's incredible. It's really good. Isle of Dogs is awesome. Okay, groovy. Okay, so what did you think of Avengers then? Did you like that one?
In terms of the Avengers, just the trilogy, I
No,
think
the most recent one, Infinity War.
Yeah, I'm saying out of the Avengers, Age of Ultron, and Infinity War, it was by far the best one. The first 2 put me to sleep.
Really? You didn't like the first Avengers movie?
No, I didn't.
Wow, that's surprising. The first one I thought was good. Age of Ultron was kind of bad. It was a mess, and the writing was annoying. But the first one I thought had a good kind of pacing to it.
Yeah, I don't really know if you ask me the reason. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't watch the other ones because the Iron Man movies I watched. I didn't really watch any of the Thor ones.
Yeah, you don't need to. You don't really need to.
But I don't know. I'm not really sure. But I don't know. I liked Infinity War. I thought it was, and I liked. Oh crap! What's his name?
Yeah.
Who are you thinking of?
The oh my god, this is so bad. The villain.
Thanos?
Yes.
Thanos,
oh my god, I can't wait. I forgot his name. But yeah, I liked him as a villain.
Yeah, he was good. Josh Brolin, he brings a kind of grisly intensity to every role, which I like. He's good. Yeah, I dug it too. I thought, I was impressed that they managed to pull off all those characters. I thought it was going to be really muddled, but I thought it was paced pretty well. I did a video review of it where I explained that they have sort of given up trying to make any of the powers or military tactics make sense because there's so many plot holes around things. But I kind of given up on that with Marvel. They sort of throw their characters into these sort of blender situations and let things sort themselves out. But I'll just mention one obvious one. Like that last scene where they had all of them fighting in Wakanda did not make any sense to me. It was the most bizarre thing. Like, why are they doing this 10th century melee rush at a bunch of dogs when a month ago I saw Black Panther and they have an advanced military, they have drone ships, they have spears that can destroy tanks. Why are they not just dropping a whole bunch of bombs on all of those like weird alien dog things? Instead, they've got Captain America running into the melee, punching them. Like, can he use a gun or an Iron Man suit or a jet or something? Like, what the fuck are they doing? It did not make any sense to me.
Man, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, this is the problem when you have when you're a super genius like me. You think about things.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of stuff like that.
Well, the thing that I do remember, especially on social media, was everyone blaming Star-Lord.
It wasn't his fault. It wasn't all his fault. I mean, it was Doctor Strange's fault for not zipping him away in a portal when he started acting like an idiot.
Yeah. Damn.
I mean, if they'd spent 2 minutes with Star-Lord, they would have realized that he's retarded and that he shouldn't have had any big part in the final plan. And the minute he started yelling at Thanos, they would have put him to sleep or knocked him out. There were like 4 other people there who could have done that. Nebula was sitting there chatting with him. Why did she not punch him in the throat?
And I don't remember if anyone knew that he and Gamora had a thing. I don't remember if he ever mentioned that. I can't remember.
It doesn't even matter. He was acting like a retard. They should have knocked him out. They should have even had him there. In fact, they should have even had that fight. They had a video by, what's it? There's a YouTube channel called How It Should Have Ended, where they showed like 5 other ways that they could have beaten Thanos. The most obvious one is Doctor Strange using the Time Stone to turn Thanos into a baby. Which I was like, yeah, why didn't you just do that? Or use a portal to cut him in half and cut his arm off. They actually showed them using the portals to cut off limbs in that movie. I don't understand why the Wizards don't use portals offensively more often.
Because it's convenient for the plot.
It's convenient for the plot, right? Because Doctor Strange, more than almost any character, is just totally broken. Doctor Strange and like Ant-Man are just so broken in terms of their powers that they have to nerf them in different ways.
Okay, so speaking of Ant-Man, I was just thinking, I think someone else mentioned this, so I'm gonna give them credit, but I can't remember who it was.
Yeah.
But it was basically so if Ant-Man was there, because obviously conveniently he's not.
Yeah.
He could have just became this massive giant, or he could have shrunk so small, brought up Thanos' asshole, and then grown big, and then go boom, no more Thanos.
Wouldn't have had to go the asshole. I don't know why you said that. But
funny for the movie, I don't know.
Okay, yes. All right, you might want to speak to your therapist about your anal fixations.
Yeah,
but the broken nature of Ant-Man in the comics, I mean, he's so small that he can literally create black holes. Like he can get so small that he can create tears in fundamental particles and do all this kind of insane sciencey shit. So he's totally broken. And Doctor Strange, it's fucking magic. I ain't got to explain shit. So he's broken as well. So they have to make them kind of dumb and not use their powers in intelligent ways.
Yeah, but Ant-Man was on house arrest or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't even see the last Ant-Man movie. It looks stupid. This is actually one thing that I give credit to DC for. Actually, with the last Justice League movie, they actually do care about character power levels. They made a big point in that movie of demonstrating who is stronger than who's faster than who, so on and so forth. They actually cared a lot about that, even though I think DC action scenes aren't as good. They're all very samey and kind of. There was a good YouTube video kind of explaining this that talked about how the physics of DC fight scenes are really lazy, whereas in Marvel fight scenes, their characters are a lot more creative with their powers, and I think that's very true. But the power levels thing has gone completely out the window with MCU. Like, for example, the fight scene with Vision when he's in Europe with Scarlet Witch.
Right.
Vision is getting into a fight with one of the children of Thanos. They're punching each other, and then they get knocked into the train station. And then Black Widow starts doing some kung fu and beats up that same guy. Vision, in terms of power level, if you remember from Civil War, is strong enough to tank a fucking bus. Like, they threw a bus at him, and he just stood there, and it bursted all around him. So how is it that there's an alien that Vision can get into a fist fight with and lose, and then Black Widow can do some kung fu and beat them, right? Like, doesn't make sense. And I would love to turn my brain off and not notice those kinds of things, but I do. And so I've given up trying to care about power levels in Marvel movies.
Well, in the words of Mr. Plinkett from Red Letter Media, because they think the audience is stupid.
Well, they're right 90% of the time, though. I mean, like, again, these movies make a ton of money, and they don't actually have to care about this stuff. So I just have to try to turn off that kind of like Simpsons comic book guy thing in my brain when I watch this stuff.
Worst movie ever.
It just never goes away when you think about like the physics of different scenes. Like even before people were complaining about it, when I first saw The Last Jedi and I saw them dropping the bombs, in space, I was like, wait a minute, isn't the gravity of that kind of fucked? Does that make sense? No, it probably doesn't.
Yeah, that was another thing too with The Last Jedi, where I think you were talking about that too. It was like, I want to know more about that sister in the beginning. I want to know more about her story.
They just killed her off right away.
Yeah,
well,
but they could make one because they're having
because she was attractive. They got rid of her because she was attractive. They wanted
That's
to make.
what I said.
Yeah, they wanted to make the pudgy one front and center. That was the priority.
How dare you? How dare you?
Being attractive is a sin. Do you recall a few months ago there was a bit of a roll of culture about cultural appropriation? This white girl in a Chinese dress.
Oh yeah.
People were complaining about that. Actually, I had made the same point on this as Molyneux, which is that people weren't mad at her for wearing a Chinese dress. They were mad at her because she was pretty.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's basically the problem.
If she'd been ugly and had like Down syndrome or something, then people would say, "Oh, she's so brave. That's awesome. She's appreciating culture." But because she was pretty and white, they said, "Oh, we have to complain. We have to attack her somehow. Let's go after this cultural appropriation bullshit," which is completely nonsense.
If she had been obese, then it would have been like, "Oh my gosh, you're
good for her.
You're a hero for all women." And
people's priorities are fucked, man.
Well, I actually kind of think that what's happened, particularly with the progressives, because they've become the establishment, is that they feel like they don't have to care about principles anymore. They don't have to worry about any kind of ideological consistency. It's really just about enforcing and maintaining their hold on the culture. It's one of the reasons why they're so nakedly against free speech now. When you're the minority, like they were in the 50s and 60s, you have to be all about free speech. You have to care a lot about, the right to say your opinions. Back when it was controversial to be gay or to be in an interracial relationship, then free speech becomes the most important issue. But now that they have a lock on the institutions, on higher education and the media and Hollywood, now free speech, they have nothing to gain from it. They have nothing to gain from open debate. They feel like they only have to lose. And so they have to find a way to censor people and justify it, even if it violates their own principles.
So to kind of completely go off topic and go back to movies, your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, Jesus. I don't have one. Of all time? I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of movies I like. I don't think I could say of all time. I could just say some movies I like.
Okay.
Okay, here's one. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
All right.
That was pretty good.
That movie is amazing. I love that movie. It's really like cheesy and dumb, but it's just kind of perfect in a way. And it's one of the reasons I ended up going to Tokyo for the first time in 2007. Of Japan-related movies, I also really like Lost in Translation. That's also really good. I don't know if you've seen that. Bill Murray, Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah, she's good. Let's see here. What else is good? There's a lot of movies I like. I mean, the action movie realm, probably Predator is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so perfectly paced. Predator is great. Alien is great. And Aliens is also good. Blade Runner I love a lot. It's one of my favorites. The original one. I thought the sequel was pretty good. I don't know. Did you see the recent Blade Runner?
I did. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
I thought it was good until the last act. I thought once Harrison Ford came in, it got pretty terrible because first of all, he didn't even look like he was in costume. He looked completely lazy. They gave him this retarded fight scene where, this 70-year-old guy is going to fist fight with a superbot and he's going to win somehow. I thought that was very egotistical and dumb. And it made the plot really convoluted, even though they gave him top billing. He had 10 minutes of screen time. But up until that point, the first 90 minutes of the movie or so, I thought it was really good. It was very well paced and good classic noir feeling. Very nice atmosphere and sound was really good. But ultimately, I don't think it's as good as the first one. The first movie, I absolutely love. And I love the first Blade Runner because it's so subdued. It's not a save the world plot, which they tried to do in the recent one with this sort of rebellion thing that they tacked on at the end. The first Blade Runner feels like just kind of a day in the life of this guy with a really shitty job. It's got this kind of very kind of blue collar sort of working class feel to it. And I always like that about Harrison Ford. He's just this dude with this shitty job that he has to do. And you're just rooting for him to survive it. And then at the end of the day, it ends and the world isn't really changed or anything. You've just been sort of invited to witness some of it. So I really like the first Blade Runner. It's so classy and so atmospheric and great.
So is there a movie that, I guess any of those three movies then that you've mentioned, or not 3 or 4, whatever, I can't remember how many movies you mentioned, but those are the ones that you could just go back and watch over and over again and never get tired of them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love sci-fi. Another movie that has a good kind of day in the life feel is Dredd, which is a pretty recent one. I don't know if you saw the recent Judge Dredd movie.
I haven't, no.
You should watch it. It's great. It's so pure. It's just like a pure action movie. It's wonderful. So I dug that. I also, for something that's a little more meditative, I really like Taxi Driver. I'm not generally a fan of Scorsese. I think he's kind of overrated. His sort of violent mobster stuff, I don't think is as brilliant as people say. But Taxi Driver is great. If you want something to, let's see here, what else is good? Oh, Secretary is a good movie. I don't know, maybe that's kind of a shady movie to recommend to a guy about to get married, but it's a great movie about sort of gender relations and this woman coming to terms with her submissive side. James Spader's in that. He's great. I really love his voice. He's the only thing I liked about Age of Ultron. His voice of Ultron. He's great. Let's see here. I could go on and on about movies, but those are some I'd recommend if you haven't seen Taxi Driver or Secretary or Lost in Translation or Dredd. Definitely see that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to see that, but for some reason I just never got to it. But
you've seen Ghost in the Shell, the anime? That's also really good.
Yes, I've seen the original movie anime, and then I watched.
The TV series is actually better. The standalone complex TV series is actually better, I think, than the movie. But both are worth seeing.
I will say though, I wasn't a fan of Innocence.
I didn't like it since much either. It was so up its own ass. Half the dialogue is quotes.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't like that. That kind of canned smartness. We're going
Yeah.
to be really, abstract to seem smart. It was really pretentious. I didn't enjoy it.
And what a disappointing way of use of Bato. He's like, oh, he's like
Yeah.
he's the lead, but he doesn't really do anything. Come
He's
on.
a great character. He's a great character who carried a movie, but they didn't give him anything interesting to do.
Yeah.
It was a navel-gazing movie. I didn't like it.
What did you think of the live action?
Awful, pretty awful. It compromised on too many things. It needed to be rated R. It needed a different actress. It needed, and the whole controversy about a white actress is retarded because Kusanagi doesn't even really look that Asian. And the original movie, they don't really care that much about it being in Japan. That's sort of not relevant. So that controversy about race bending in Hollywood is stupid. But I didn't like it.
I will say I probably liked it more than you. I definitely agree. It should have been R. It would have been great if it was an R-rated movie.
It needed to be.
The plot was, like you were saying, everything was kind of just there were too many leeways and all that stuff, but visually it looked amazing. That was the best part. At least to me, it was great looking.
It was okay. On a purely technical level, I would say it's visually impressive that they did a lot of work that was kind of interesting. But I actually don't think it was well directed. And there's another YouTube video that put this in a really good way. I think it was the Nerd Rider series, where he compared the directing of the original Ghost in the Shell anime to the new one. He made the point about how the anime had all of these kind of street level, human level shots that really drew you into the world, while the live action movie of Ghost in the Shell had all of these kind of random sweeping shots where they would fly around the city, and it would give you this very artificial view of the city. And it takes you out of it. Like, it's technically nice to look at, but it doesn't work thematically into drawing you into the world. And I really agree with that. So yeah, there's some good elements, but it suffers from what I call PG-13ism, which is that every major movie these days has to be PG-13. And so they have to compromise on a lot of things. It's one of the things that's made the Mission Impossible movies kind of boring, and the Fast and the Furious movies are kind of boring. They all have this very sameness because they can't do anything too unpredictable or daring because of chasing this rating.
It sucks too because they're like Deadpool and Deadpool 2 even though I thought even though the first one, in my opinion, was better than the second.
It was. The first one was much better.
Yeah, but
they're rated R.
There are R-rated movies that have done well in the box office. It's like they don't even look at those examples and be like, well, I guess we'll at least try and take that risk. Like the Expendables movies, how crazy and ridiculous they are. They made good money, except for the third one, obviously, but the first two were R, and box office wise, not pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's some movies that should be rated R. Like Dredd was rated R. It needed to be rated R, and it was great because of it. If they tried to do Dredd as a PG-13 movie, it would have been awful. Actually, I think they did. The Stallone version, what was that rated? Was that PG-13 or not? I don't remember. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, some movies need to be rated R. Sorry about the typing. I'm just checking.
I will say that my favorite movie is Police Story, starring Jackie Chan.
That's a classic.
That's my favorite movie ever.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's great. Yeah, he's done a lot. That's a whole series. There's a bunch of them. Yeah, I love his 80s. His 80s comedy movies are so comfy. They're like the most comfy movies ever. In fact, you know what? I'm going to post a link in the chat. Actually, I don't think I can, but I'll post a link somewhere. There's this one great music video mashup of not Meals on Wheels. Which is it? My Lucky Stars. One of my other favorite Jackie Chan movies. So I'll see. I don't think I can post.
Yeah, My Lucky Stars is more of like an ensemble. He's just. Yeah. It's mostly
it's more Sammo Hung. It's more Sammo Hung, yeah.
Yeah, it's more Sammo Hung, but yeah, Jackie's like hey, look, we got Jackie Chan. Oh my god, I gotta go see it now. And he's like maybe in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, he's great. He's great in that.
Yeah, he's really good in that. But yeah, the 80s was like his pinnacle. But and obviously some of his latest movies are kind of but I really enjoyed him in The Foreigner. I thought he was really good in that movie.
I didn't see that, actually. I meant to. Oh, wow. I forgot about that movie. I saw the trailer, and it looked interesting. Kind of a more grizzled Jackie Chan, looked kind of dark. I want to see that.
The weak point for that movie is that there are too many subplots. I think they should have focused on Jackie's character and how he, is intertwined with Pierce Brosnan's character. Yeah. Because they're kind of related somehow, but yeah, I think if they focused on them more, it would have been great. But Jackie Chan, I mean, he's great. Like anytime there's an action sequence, it's really
great.
gritty and
let me throw one other movie at you. And by the way, I'm going to get out of here in like 5 minutes. But
yeah, for sure. I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
Have you seen Interstellar?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
What did you think of that one?
Oh man, I think it's lesser Nolan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's lesser Nolan than
lesser Nolan.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. I wrote an essay comparing it to The Martian because it is came out around the same time, and they both have Matt Damon, and they both deal with space travel and kind of crazy stuff happening in space. And the thing I noticed is that, so first of all, I really like Interstellar. It has a great soundtrack.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The theme of Interstellar is sort of the exact opposite of the theme of The Martian, because The Martian, the core idea is all that humanity is willing to do to save one person, whereas the theme of Interstellar is all that one person is willing to do to save humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that The Martian thematically appeals more to the ego, the idea of like, I'm so important that the world will stop and spend billions of dollars to rescue me, right? That's what they do in The Martian. They do all this stuff. These astronauts give up years of their lives to go save him. Yeah. The millions of dollars they spend, fuck starving Africans. We're going to save this one white dude in space, right? So, like, it appeals to the ego, this idea of I'm the most important person in the world. Whereas Interstellar is a slightly more challenging moral idea of all that one person is willing to do to sacrifice to save anonymous masses and generations that they'll never meet. How much do you care about the world beyond your own lifespan, beyond your own death? And that is a sign of the power of a culture, kind of like what I said about, the old people planting trees that they won't get to sit under. This is one of the things that makes Muslim culture very powerful, that makes Chinese culture and Indian culture very powerful. It helps them to preserve their higher birth rates, this sense of being a part of something bigger than oneself and transcending just individual priorities and individual comforts. And it's something that Westerners had at one time, but they've sort of given up and replaced with this sort of materialistic, market-based philosophy. So yeah, it's just a thought I'd throw out there. Give Interstellar another watch. It's actually more subtle than you think. It's really good.
Yeah, it was good. I just don't remember a whole lot, but yeah, I probably would have to give it another watch because like Nolan's movies are, I don't know, they're always interesting, even if you don't necessarily like them. Yeah, they're always interesting to watch.
And they're balls serious. That's the thing I like about Nolan. He doesn't put a lot of humor in his movies, even when he's doing totally ridiculous stuff, like in The Dark Knight Rises. With various scenes in that just don't bear any scrutiny at all, just ridiculous. He has this unsmiling intensity in his movies that I respect. Whereas in Marvel movies, they can't do a single scene without a quip, without a joke. Thor is watching his homeworld be destroyed, and we're going to throw in a joke. They're so terrified of sincerity, of just standing for something. Whereas Nolan, he puts it all out there, even when it doesn't quite work or it's flawed. He just puts it out there, and I like that about his films.
So the last thing before you can go. What did you think of Insomnia?
Insomnia is that's the one with Robin Williams. No, I'm thinking of a different one.
Yeah. Robin Williams and
Robin Williams
and Hilary Swank.
Robin Williams. I don't think I sat through that from start to finish. I think I saw half of it with my brother a long time ago, and I never got to see the rest of it. Did you see Memento though?
Yeah.
Memento I've seen a lot. I think I don't know if it's his earliest film, but it's one of his early films. And that one I saw like 3 times, and I actually really liked. But Insomnia, I don't remember the second half of that at all.
Yeah, give that one another watch, and I'll give Interstellar another watch.
Deal.
Robin Williams, he steals the show because he's not, like you're saying, the first half. He's not really in it for the first 30 or 40 minutes, but then once he appears, woo!
Yeah.
Crazy in that movie.
Okay.
I love him.
I will.
Such a good actor, man. He was such a good actor. Anytime his comedic movies were okay, but man, he was such a good actor. 1 Hour Photo is my favorite Robin Williams movie by far.
I saw that. It's dark.
Yeah,
really great.
By far my favorite Williams movie, no doubt.
Yeah, he's great. He's very talented, both I think comedically and dramatically. I think he's very talented.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll go ahead and let you go because I know you had another live stream you gotta go to. But
I do. Yeah, I got to prepare for that, and this has been a lot of fun. I hope to get the chance to chat with you guys again at some point. And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is there anything that you want to plug before you go?
If you're interested in finding a spouse, which I assume you two aren't, but for other people, if you go to yakukon.com, yakukon.com, that's our matchmaking site. Actually, you guys can use the site because there's a link there for building marriage contracts, and even married couples can use that if you want to create a relationship agreement. They're pretty detailed. You can include stuff like who's responsible for housework and how much, who's responsible for paying the bills. There's intimacy stuff. You can regulate how much sex you're going to have. Whatever you need to put in writing. If you need a contract for your relationship, go for it. So yeah, anyone can go check it out.
I'm gonna do the Marvel thing and be like 2 times a week. That's it.
What?
Exactly. You can be very strict about it. Very strict. I know she's kind of a harlot, so you have to keep her off of you.
Oh, how dare you!
Do what you got to do.
Anyway, it's been awesome talking to you, and we'll definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, been real. Take care, you guys.
All right, have a good one.
Have a good one.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.